The second I stepped into the private dining room, my stomach dropped. This wasn't brunch. The lights were too harsh. The table was too empty. And sitting dead center was a stack of documents lined up beside a pen I definitely hadn't brought. Then I noticed the man in the suit. He wasn't holding a menu. His laptop was already open, eyes lifting straight to me like I was late for something important. Something planned. My mom smiled and gestured toward the chair across from her like everything was normal. "We just need to talk about what's fair," she said lightly. "Now that your father's gone." That's when it clicked. "I'm Sarah. I'm 28. I work remotely in tech, and I've spent enough time around contracts, terms of service, and fine print to recognize a setup the moment I walk into one. Still, nothing prepares you for realizing your own mother invited you to a meeting where the outcome was already decided." The man in the suit introduced himself as her attorney. The papers in front of me? A drafted agreement. Not to clarify anything. Not to explain the will. To redistribute my inheritance. As if my dad's final decisions were a rough draft they planned to revise over lunch. He slid the paperwork toward me and explained, in a calm, rehearsed voice, that signing would allow the family to share more equitably. All I had to do was agree to transfer the majority of what my father left me, for the good of everyone. Around the table, people watched me closely, like I'd already failed some invisible test. When I said no, the mood shifted instantly. The smiles disappeared. The warmth evaporated. They started talking about courts, about delays, about how complicated things could become for someone my age if I didn't cooperate. Credit, records, stress. I listened quietly, my heart pounding, but behind all that noise I could hear my dad's voice. Calm, steady, telling me who actually had the law on their side. I looked around the table, counting silently, then out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They frowned. "You're a lot of people," I said evenly. Confused glances passed between them. That's when I smiled for the first time that day. "Funny thing is," I added, placing my phone beside the pen untouched, "I only brought one person too." A knock sounded on the door. And that's when everything changed. But to understand why this moment mattered, you need to know how I got here. Because I wasn't always the woman sitting across from lawyers, measuring people like pieces on a board. I grew up in a quiet San Diego suburb, believing family meant movie nights, grocery runs, and my dad's terrible jokes about JavaScript. My dad, Richard, was a software engineer. Practical. Careful. The kind of man who drove the same car for years because it still worked. He believed security came from discipline, not appearances. My mom hated that. She wanted gated communities. New cars. The kind of life that photographed well. When I was 15, those differences finally tore open. They sat me down at the kitchen table one night. Dad with bank statements. Mom scrolling vacation homes. She said she was tired of settling. He said he was tired of pretending. After the divorce, I stayed with my dad in a modest condo near the coast. Nothing flashy but honest. We ate takeout tacos, tracked budgets, and talked about credit scores instead of designer labels. My mom moved north, remarried, and reinvented herself. New husband. New kids. New image. I became an afterthought. She didn't ask about my goals. She called to brag about hers. The only thing she ever wanted from my dad was money, and when he stopped giving it to her, she waited. Quietly. Carefully. I didn't know it then, but while my dad was teaching me how to protect my future, he was doing the same thing legally. Because he knew one day, she'd come for what he left behind. And this meeting? This was her move. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. If this already has you hooked, give it a like, it really helps the channel. And comment below what you would have done walking into that room. After that meeting, I didn't cry. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my hands ached. My mom's smile, the lawyer's calm voice, the way everyone at that table looked at me like I was being difficult for not signing my future away, it all replayed on a loop. I kept thinking one thing over and over. They didn't invite me there to talk. They invited me there to fold. For a few days after, my phone was quiet. No texts. No calls. Nothing. I almost convinced myself that the surprise appearance of my dad's lawyer had scared my mom into backing off. That illusion lasted exactly 3 days. The first message came late at night. long polished. Disappointed. She wrote about how money changes people. About how my dad would be ashamed of the cold person I was becoming. About how family should handle things privately, not drag outsiders into it. The next message was shorter. If you keep pushing this, things could get complicated. That's when I stopped seeing it as guilt. It was leverage. I forwarded everything to Elena. She replied with one sentence. Don't respond. Save everything. That same night, I sat at my kitchen counter with my laptop open and went through every account I owned. Bank. Investments. Email. Passwords changed. Two-factor authentication turned on. Credit frozen. It felt dramatic, until I remembered who I was dealing with. My dad used to say, people get reckless when they think they're entitled to something. And my mom had always believed entitlement was the same thing as love. A few days later, an email landed in my inbox that looked exactly like a real bank alert. Same logo. Same colors. Same language. Action required. Something about it felt wrong. The timing. The tone. I hovered over the link instead of clicking. The address was close but not exact. My stomach dropped. I called the bank directly. They confirmed two things. They hadn't sent the email. And there had been a failed login attempt on one of my investment accounts from an unfamiliar device. That was the moment fear turned into clarity. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was someone trying to get into my life through the back door. I filed reports. Fraud department. Local police. An online complaint with federal cybercrime. Still, part of me hoped it would stop there. It didn't. 2 weeks later, during a normal workday, my phone buzzed with a security alert. Motion detected near your building. I pulled up the camera feed. Victor's SUV was parked across the street. Engine running. Laptop open. Seconds later, another alert popped up. This time from the mailbox camera. My mom. Standing there, phone pressed to her ear, scanning the area like she was waiting for a signal. At the exact same time, my banking app sent a notification. Unrecognized device attempting to access your account. I didn't breathe. I hit screen record and watched it happen in real time. My mother at my mailbox, Victor in his car, my account lighting up with warnings. They weren't guessing. They were coordinating. I sent everything to Elena, the footage, the timestamps, the bank logs. She called immediately. This is no longer pressure, she said. This is attempted identity theft. The next morning we filed formal reports. Not emotional ones. Factual ones. Dates. Times. Evidence. And suddenly, the people who thought they could scare me into giving up my inheritance were facing something they couldn't manipulate. A paper trail. That was the turning point. Because for the first time I wasn't reacting to my mother. I was documenting her. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. If this story is gripping you, give it a like, it really helps the channel. And comment below what you would do if family crossed this line. Courtrooms don't feel dramatic the way they do on TV. They feel heavy, like the walls have absorbed decades of lies, excuses, and people insisting they were misunderstood. I sat beside Elena at the plaintiff's table, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold minutes after we walked in. Across the room, my mother sat next to Victor, posture perfect, hair immaculate, dressed like someone who wanted to look responsible rather than caught. Her new lawyer was older, smoother. The kind of man who believed confidence alone could bend reality. When the judge entered, the room stood. My knees trembled, not from fear, but from the realization that my life was about to be displayed frame by frame. And it was. The prosecutor didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize anything. He simply laid the facts out one by one. The failed login attempts. The phishing email. The timestamps. The camera footage. The screen lit up with a video I'd watched dozens of times, but seeing it here made my stomach twist. My front door. My mailbox. My mother standing there, phone to her ear, scanning the area like she was doing something harmless. Then the feed switched. Victor in his SUV. Laptop open. Fingers moving. The prosecutor paused the video and pointed to the timestamp. Then he brought up the bank log. Same minute. Same window. Same attempt. It was no longer a story. It was a timeline. Their lawyer tried to spin it. He talked about confusion, about grief, about old habits from when accounts were shared years ago. He implied I was paranoid, emotional, overreacting. I didn't interrupt, because I knew what came next. Elena stood and dismantled the narrative piece by piece. She reminded the court that the will had already been probated, that every account was in my father's sole name, then legally transferred to mine. No joint access, no ambiguity. She played the voicemail where my mother's voice slipped, just enough, to reveal the threat beneath the guilt. She showed the fake email. She showed the report filings. When I took the stand, I didn't perform. I didn't cry. I told the truth the way my dad would have explained a software bug. Calm, precise, unemotional. When the prosecutor asked how it felt to realize my own mother was behind it, my throat tightened, but I answered honestly. It felt like watching someone try to steal the last thing my dad ever protected for me. The judge took his time reviewing the evidence. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady and blunt. He said this was not a family misunderstanding. It was fraud. He found my mother and Victor guilty of attempted identity theft and financial fraud-related charges. There was no theatrical sentence, just real consequences. Heavy fines. Full restitution of my legal costs. Probation with financial monitoring. A mandatory financial crimes program. A 5-year restraining order barring any contact with me or anything tied to my identity. Then he did something Victor clearly hadn't anticipated. He referred the case to the licensing board overseeing Victor's real estate credentials. I watched Victor's shoulders drop. That was the moment he understood what losing a license really meant. When we stepped into the hallway afterward, there was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation. My mother stood very still, staring at the floor like someone finally realizing there was no filter strong enough to fix this. I walked past her without stopping. Not to be cruel, but because the court had already said everything that mattered. In the weeks that followed, my life didn't magically turn perfect. But it got quiet. The good kind of quiet. No panic checking my phone. No guilt-soaked voicemails. No threats wrapped in concern. My accounts were safe. My credit was frozen and monitored. My doorbell camera showed nothing more dangerous than delivery drivers and my neighbor walking his dog. Normal felt incredible. With Elena's help, I reorganized my finances, not as targets to defend, but as tools to build a future. We diversified investments, strengthened savings, and set up plans my dad would have approved of immediately. I stayed in the condo we once shared. Some mornings, I still looked at the empty chair where he used to sit with his coffee and printed code. It hurt, but cleanly. Therapy helped me understand something important. I had spent years trying to earn safety from someone who believed love meant control. Letting go of that fantasy hurt less than carrying it. I found new spaces. A yoga studio. A women in tech group. Communities that didn't care about my last name, only who I was. I quietly donated part of the restitution to an organization that helps victims of identity theft. I didn't post about it. I just saved the confirmation email in a folder titled, "Dad would like this." My mother's life changed quickly once consequences replaced control. The house she used to show off went on the market. The posts slowed, then shifted to vague quotes about betrayal and starting over. None of them mentioned me, and that was fine. People love to say, "But she's still your mother." What I learned is that shared DNA does not entitle anyone to your future. Real family protects you when it's inconvenient. My dad's real inheritance wasn't money. It was knowledge. Boundaries, and the courage to say no out loud, in a room full of people who expected me to fold. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. If this story stayed with you, give it a like, it really helps the channel. And comment below. If family tried to take what was meant for your future, would you stay quiet or make it stop? Your answer matters.